The Kariba Dam, the largest man-made lake in the world by volume, built along the Zambezi River basin. The Zambezi River is the fourth largest river basin in Africa and home to the mighty Victoria Falls.
The Kariba Dam is the entire catchment, starting from where the Zambezi River starts, near the Congo border there in northwestern Zambia. And also it includes all those tributaries coming from Angola down all the way. The blue line indicates the Zambezi River itself, and then it falls into the Kariba Dam. And from Zimbabwe, you also have this catchment, which also brings in water into the Kariba.
Kariba, a shared energy source between Zambia and Zimbabwe, generates 1,080 megawatts for Zambia and 1,050 megawatts for Zimbabwe. Since the 1990s and as recently as 2019, the Zambezi Basin has experienced recurrent severe droughts. Kariba Hydropower Dam water levels dropped to 10% of usable water for hydropower, while water flows at Victoria Falls dropped 11 centimeters below the 1995-1996 season.
We had the first ever flooded, which was happening in 1968-1969 season, which recorded the highest level of water. We came to the 70s, it was also having a lot of water. The change started in the 90s. That's why we started seeing a bit of change of amount of water that is needed for generation started reducing. Until when we reached in the 20s. I remember that was 2008 when we had another surplus of water. That was too much, and even at the dam, we couldn't hold the water. We have to release it. And we even announced to the locals to say, Zambezi River will open the spillway gate to release more water to pass so that the dam cannot burst or it cannot cause any danger. But I can tell you from that time in the early 20s to date, we have not done that.
Both Kariba South and North Power utilities curtailed their average generation to 250 megawatts in December 2022 due to decreased water levels.
I think I can roughly say for about 5 years back, that's when we observed very serious declines in water level in the lake. That had never been seen before. And that situation has continued until now. But that has huge implications now in terms of the productivity of the lake itself. We need a serious flooding to take place for the lake to fill up right now.
As a result, Zimbabwe struggled through 19 hours of load shedding, while Zambia had to deal with 6-hour power outages.
Right now, we're now talking about 2022-2023 to be the worst. Yeah, what's very sad is that even now the inflows that we're receiving and the water levels at the moment are still not as much as we can compare to last year, which means that there's a possibility of the repeat of the situation that we saw last year, which should be a wake-up for us to start looking at, of course, options to mitigate the situation that we're seeing.
The Zambezi River provides the majority of Lake Kariba's inflow, accounting for 80%. Direct rainfall on the lake surface and tributaries provide the remaining 20% of the water.
The inflows that come from during the rainfall season from December all the way from Angola and so on, we get the maximum flood starting from March, April. That's when it reaches Kariba. And then, all the way up to about August, July, August. You'd see that the lake is full, But now that's not happening. It is just a slight increase and then that's it.
Around 2019, there was actually a drought in the Zambezi, and upstream it was unbelievable that we could actually walk to the riverbed on the Zambezi, and we can also see the adverse impacts on the inadequacy of water to generate electricity in the Kariba Dam. And right up to this day, we are still faced with the adverse impacts whereby there is not enough water for generation of electricity, particularly at the Kariba facilities.
Last year, it was documented, I think, around December. I think we had only a few days of power generation before we were cut off by the Zambezi River Authority to say, Kariba Power Station must stop power generation because there's a certain limit, where the power station is not allowed to draw down water for power generation. If I recall, Zambia had to allocate part of its water quota to Zimbabwe to enable the power station to continue running.
The Zambezi Basin has high level of natural climate variability. The river and its tributaries are prone to significant seasonal fluctuations with a clear cycle of floods and drought, which have a significant negative influence on energy production, way of life, and the economies of the basin. However, human activities have significantly impacted the Zambezi ecology despite the temperature rise.
Now, when you look at what is happening, you would think it's natural cause to a large extent. For me, even the climatic variation is as a result of the human activities on the ground. If we never lost the forest cover, we would have not lost the perennial streams, there would have been no dams, there would have been less, if anything, the boreholes that people are using to abstract water from the ground.
The Zambezi River Authority, which manages Kariba Dam, says that during April and June, a notable rise in the Kariba Dam water level is observed. The time frame in which Lake Kariba's water levels are significantly influenced by the waters from the Barotse floodplains, which form part of the upper Zambezi catchment. But because of the rising temperatures, the Barotse loses about 1,500 millimeters of water annually from evaporation, which reduces the amount of water flowing into the lower Zambezi River system.
In terms of water values, the Barotse floodplain is almost like a sponge and almost like a basin type kind of formation, whereby you find that the lowland areas are almost like these lower part of my palms, and then you've got then the margins of the Barotse floodplain, which then are surrounded by this upper forested area. And because of that, it extends over 270 in length and over 30k in width. Obviously, when it inundates or in terms of flooding, it can reach as high as 550,000 hectares. So it's a massive system that is almost breathing and contracting. You find that when the water comes, it sort of swells and then comes up. So it's, in a way, it almost acts like the lungs of the system. In terms of where the Barotse floodplain sits, it sits right in the middle of two agroecological regions, which are characterized by difference in precipitation, in temperature, but also in humidity. Upwards of the Barotse floodplains, where you've got the high rainfall areas, and then below it you've then got areas of low rainfall areas. And because of that, you can almost see like a transition between very high rainfall areas and also very low rainfall areas. And in that way, it then sort of acts like a sponge that slowly releases water from these headwaters to the regions that don't necessarily receive a lot of rainfall. And because of that, then it plays this function of water security, not only for the region, the communities, but also downstream communities for the region. And in terms of energy production, we all know that it then also serves as this ecological infrastructure that supplies areas like the Kariba Dam to produce energy.
The prospecting for new minerals, logging of indigenous trees like rosewood and African teak through forest concessions, the conversion of forest areas for agriculture and increased development all poses threats to the Barotse floodplain and upper Zambezi. This is despite the fact that the Barotse serves an important ecological function for Lake Kariba.
There is actually a proven scientific cycle that the trees provide to the rain cycle itself. 80% of the rainfall that we have comes from tree transpiration. This is why in a desert you don't find sufficient rainfall. It tells you a story. A desert does not have huge cover of forest. There's minimum forest cover, and the rainfall pattern is actually very low. Where there are huge forests, the rainfall pattern is higher. Just not far away from here, the Congo Basin. The rainfall pattern in the Congo Basin is larger than the rainfall pattern we have in Zambia. Why? It's because of the size of the forest cover they have there. They have bigger trees which are measuring diameter at 5 meters. Some of them go as high as 80 meters high. In Zambia, the tallest tree is only about 23 meters. So the larger the stock of forest cover, the actually maximum rainfall you expect to have in that area. The reason why the agroecological region has been shifting is purely to do with the change, the conversion induced by people who have cut the trees that were sustaining the microclimate that supports rainfall.
One of them, I think, has been large-scale infrastructure projects, whether it be, for example, in the mining sector. We now know, particularly, for example, in the headwaters of the Kabompo, which is now being coined as a new copper belt because of the increase in mining exploration as well as mining. I think most recently, in last year, where we heard, for example, a new commitment by First Quantum Mining in trying to invest more money, a total of $1.3 billion US dollars in trying to upscale the mining efforts around the northwest province there. So obviously that has got a potential to affect key recharge areas and forest areas that, for example, act as supply areas for surface water as well as groundwater. And so obviously associated with mining comes obviously the push for energy, sort of a coupled demand between infrastructure but also the push for energy. And with this energy comes in, you want to then dam several areas. But I think what has lagged behind is really the research angle to it, in terms of understanding, for example, if we're going to dam several places on the Zambezi, what's the impact, for example, on these ecological values that we're talking about?
Zambia, Angola, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, Tanzania, Botswana, and Namibia all share the Zambezi River Basin as a transboundary water resource. To manage the shared water resource responsibly, transnational cooperation is essential.
The instruments that have been developed so far include the Zambezi Strategic Plan, which is a long-term strategic plan focusing on the key pillars that the region needs to focus in order to address the challenges. Another instrument of cooperation also includes the procedure for notification of planned measures in each of the riparian states. Knowing what your neighbor, your partners is planning to do is also assisting, creating that transparency, but also knowing if there are any impacts of the developments that the other country is maybe impacting on the countries that are downstream or upstream. Another procedure which has been developed, rules and procedure for data and information sharing. This is an important tool because data on the water resource and the trends of water resource and the resource in general from each country, the sharing is what makes now the region work together, they get the entire picture of what is happening with the resource. If the trends are not encouraging, then you already know what is happening in the region in terms of the data and the information on water resources.
In 2015, the World Bank and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, through its African Climate Policy Center, released a groundbreaking report titled Enhancing the Climate Resilience of Africa's Infrastructure that revealed that, depending on the climate scenario that unfolds, the Zambezi River is likely to lose at least 60% of its capacity to produce hydropower. Kariba Dam already struggles to produce adequate energy. 2 hydroelectric projects are being considered: the Batoke Gorge plant upstream Kariba, which Zambia and Zimbabwe will share equally, and Mpandankwa hydropower downstream Mozambique's Kahorabasa. Experts say if these dams are to function sustainably, climate change resilience must be expressly incorporated.
Investments in infrastructure for data collection, that is very important, as well as the processing and management of that information, the distribution of that information. So it's very important that they play that critical role, because at the moment an experience within the watercourse is that there isn't sufficient infrastructure for the purposes of collecting data and information on the various variables to do with climate.
The capacities in these sectors is what actually challenges the performance of the good intentions that are there, the good plans that are there. So we need to focus on how do we build these sectors to respond to the issues we are expecting within the space of climate resilience. Capacities could be in different forms. It may not necessarily be numbers of staff only, but also the quality of service that the small numbers can actually offer, meaning training, instilling new skills in these officers that are there is one way of building the capacity, besides just the numbers, because you can have so many people, but the quality of delivery is still low. Capacity also can come in form of financial support, but even there, you don't necessarily need to provide hard cash for some institutions to perform. You could create means of these institutions to generate their own resources. That's another way of building capacity. You don't necessarily need to bring in cash, but means for the institutions to be able to generate resources from the activities they are doing, like traceability activities. How do you trace the extraction of timber? Where is it coming from? Who is producing? Where is it going? At what value? That system of traceability is lacking. Also, providing information, key information, quality information, providing a base where people can actually see what is there. The only way institutions can be helped is where you can say, this is what we are doing, and we can't do A, B, C, D for A, B, C, D reasons. But if there's no information provided, because we don't have that capacity to disseminate, then you will actually be acting as if you are alone. But if these institutions can be supported, then the aspects on them providing services on climate resilience will actually be supported fully. The aspect to implement these actions could not maybe be on the basis that we don't have capacities to some extent in terms of numbers. It could be that we are not actually collaborating. The institutions are not collaborating. You need to bring all these key institutions to a round table meeting. How do we ensure that we contribute to the mother plan, the main plan for the country? Bringing this stronger collaboration between institutions would help change, and therefore we'll be meeting the aspirations we want to see within the climate resilience, because climate knows no specific thematic area. It impacts across several sectors, and the only way we can win for resilience is to bring these sectors to begin to coordinate and speak to each other, implement things together.